Climate change, poverty, and war. The reality is, the world is getting hotter, wetter, and weather phenomena are becoming more frequent and more extreme by the second. And as humans continue to impose themselves onto the planet in the pursuit of profit, carbon emissions from manufacturing and waste production will continue to be released and trapped in our atmosphere, resulting in a hotter world, followed by a plethora of crises which are likely to continue through and past our century if nothing is done. More frequent and intense heat waves will cause widespread crop failure, interfere with fishing quality, and turn arid land into barren fields. Melting glaciers and rising sea levels are putting virtually every coastal nation at risk of flooding. Vietnam, Thailand, and India are among the nations that qualify as such. Extreme weather phenomena like Hurricane Harvey, that was supposed to occur once in 100 years, are now happening once in 16 years. And fire season and droughts are becoming more frequent, lasting longer, and are becoming more and more severe every year. Between 2030 and 2050, climate change is expected to cause an additional 250,000 deaths from malaria, malnutrition, and heat stroke alone. But the reality is that climate change does not affect everyone equally. Wealthier people and wealthier nations will have the means to protect themselves from the effects of climate change, while the poor will not. Higher incomes allow people to live in safe places away from swelling rivers and tinder dry wooded areas with air conditioning and clean air. Privilege fills grocery carts despite soaring food prices, and wealthier federal budgets can compensate their citizens when climate change harms livelihoods. And the lowest income nations like Somalia, Syria, and Burundi, whose citizens often rely on fertile land, healthy herds, and full catches of fish, will be pushed even further down. Studies show that if urgent action is not taken, an additional 100 million people will be forced into poverty within this century. And out of the people who get hit the hardest, children will suffer the worst. Consider child health. In developing countries, the health of children is already substantially worse than in countries like Canada. Children in developing countries are 10 times more likely to die before the age of 5 than in developed countries. Now factor in hotter days, water shortages, increase in infectious illnesses, flooding, natural disasters, and air pollution. And as freshwater sources dry up, children will have to travel further to fetch clean water. And as food sources and clean water sources disappear, malnutrition and dirty drinking water will take its place, which serve to cause serious illness, of which often go untreated because of the family's loss of income. And as climate change triggers displacement or migration because of the ravaging of family resources, children are ripped from the safety of community and are often pulled from education to contribute to generating income for the family, thereby depriving them of education, one of the most effective ways of alleviating poverty and reducing vulnerability. In these cases where children are taken out of school to contribute to their family's income, they risk being hurt, maimed, or even killed doing whatever work is available in a hunger crisis, resulting in high susceptibility for unsanctioned labor, exploitation, and trafficking. These effects are especially brutal on girls. As communities grow increasingly destitute, parents may choose to arrange child marriages for their daughters. Over 12 million girls are forced into childhood marriages every single year. And unless progress is made to counter that trend, more than 120 million additional girls will be forced to marry before 18. That's on top of the 650 million locked in childhood marriages currently. And climate change is among the primary factors that risk increasing those numbers. In the most tragic cases, countries like South Africa consist of girls as young as 12 years old who are forced to prostitute themselves to survive the perils of drought and hunger crises, very often at the price of one loaf of bread. In addition to the mentioned horror, climate change compounding with economic, political, and social strife will only serve to increase the likelihood of war, even more so when the competitiveness over invaluable resources increase. Experts point to Sudan's civil war as the first example of modern climate change induced conflict, of which the United Nations linked directly to desertification and dwindling rainfall caused by rising temperatures. Famine plagued Sudan, and paired with deep rooted social and political tensions, exacerbated conflict until the country erupted into civil war. Syria has been engulfed in civil war since 2011. Experts agree that detrimental drought played a major role in triggering the war, all the while acknowledging the economic hardship, corrupt leadership, and inequality. And finally, a decade long drought in the late 1900s caused Lake Chad, then the sixth largest freshwater lake in the world, to shrink. On the edge of the Sahara, Lake Chad is a source of life for the populating Niger, Nigeria, Cameroon, and Chad. And as people became concentrated in a significantly smaller area, there is a notable rise in confrontation between local farmers, herders, and fishermen. And as resources begin to deplete on a larger scale, the risks of conflict are only bound to translate globally. So, to sum up, our planet is dying, and people around the world will suffer, of which the impoverished will suffer first, and the children of whom will suffer far, far worse, all the while increasing the likelihood of war. If you're wondering, how can I make a difference? Well, here's how. Fight disinformation. For years, media pundits, partisan think tanks, and special groups funded by fossil fuel companies have raised doubts about global warming through propaganda and the pursuit of preserving profits. Prepare and adapt. No matter how quickly we reduce emissions, the reality is the climate change impacts are inevitable. The seas are rising, temperatures break records every single year. So, in the short term, we need to adapt, plan for water scarcity, advocate for building more resilient cities, and investment should be scientifically and socially just and focus on where the impacts will be the greatest. Act now. Spread the word. Green your commute and invest in renewable energy resources and tools wherever possible. And if you want to go a step further, consider donating to foundations like the David Suzuki Foundation and the Give Well Foundation, both of which are very effective and among the most reliable of the foundations that exist today. And if you want to learn even more, visit climate.nasa.gov for accurate, up to date information about climate change and interactive diagrams that display live action temperatures, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide levels around the world in real time. It's a wonderful resource. But before you go, one last food for thought. The wealthiest countries are responsible for the destruction of the planet, even though the poor experience the ramifications. Will the wealthy finally take action when the effects of climate change become strong enough to reach them? When their children, their resources, and their profits are impacted? And when they finally do decide to take action, will it be too late? Thanks for watching.